I am Darla, and I've always had a knack for turning chaos into something beautiful. As an events coordinator, I thrive on the rush of pulling off a perfect wedding or gala, every detail clicking into place like a well-rehearsed dance. It's not just a job, it's my art, my way of making people's dreams real. But my family? They don't see it. To them, I'm just Darla, the one who plays with flowers and tablecloths while my siblings chase real success. My brother Vance, it's with his tech startup, and my sister Mavis, a lawyer with a corner office. They're the golden ones. Me, I'm the odd piece that doesn't fit their polished puzzle. Growing up in our sprawling house outside Seattle, I learned early that love came with conditions. My parents, Orson and Nadine, obsessed with status, measured us by trophies and titles. Vance's coding awards and Mavis's debate medals lined the mantel. My sketches of dream venues stayed tucked in a drawer. I'd overhear them at dinner parties boasting about Vance's latest app or Mavis's courtroom wins, while I got a pat on the head for helping with the neighbor's anniversary party. It stung, but I kept going, pouring my heart into every event I planned, hoping one day they'd see me. The real kicker came 3 years ago, when Vance got engaged to Pippa, a socialite with a laugh like breaking glass. They wanted a wedding that screamed wealth, and I, fool that I was, offered to plan it. Not just plan, fund it too. I dipped into my savings, maxed out credit cards, and worked nights to make it the event of the year. Why? Because I thought it'd finally earn me a seat at their table. I never imagined a bank transfer would unravel everything, exposing their betrayal in a way that set me on a path to fight for my respect. Before I tell you how that transfer changed my life, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe. You'll want to see how this ends. I kept the wedding a secret, not just the funding but the sheer scale of what I pulled off. Vance and Pippa's big day was a masterpiece. Cascading orchids, a string quartet, a venue that looked like it belonged in a fairy tale. Guests whispered about how it rivaled celebrity weddings, and I glowed, thinking I'd finally proved myself. But at the reception, Orson toasted Vance's vision and Pippa's elegance. Not a word about me. Mavis even joked I was good at following orders. I smiled through the hurt, clinging to the hope that my family would come around. Meanwhile, my business, Darla's Dream Events, was growing. I'd landed clients across the Pacific Northwest, from tech moguls to local legends, each event bigger than the last. I didn't tell my family, though. Why bother when they'd just scoff? Instead, I poured everything into my work, building a reputation for turning even the wildest ideas into reality. By last year, I was on the verge of a deal with a major hotel chain to handle their national events, a game changer that'd put my name on the map. But as that deal loomed, so did the annual family dinner, a ritual of judgment I couldn't escape. That dinner was where things always went sideways. Orson would grill us on our achievements, Nadine would compare us to her friends' kids, and Vance and Mavis would preen while I shrank. This year felt different, though. I was carrying the weight of my secret sacrifices, and something in me was starting to crack. I didn't know then that a single notification on my phone would blow it all open, forcing me to face the truth about my family and myself. Looking back, I can pinpoint the moments when I started to disappear in my family's eyes. I was maybe 12, sitting at the kitchen table with my sketchbook, designing a fake festival with stages and lights. Mavis, 16 then, burst in with a debate trophy, and Nadine practically threw a parade. "This is what ambition looks like, Darla," she said, barely glancing at my drawings. I remember shoving my sketchbook under a pile of homework, cheeks burning. That was the pattern. Vance and Mavis shone, and I faded into the background, my passions dismissed as hobbies. By high school, I was organizing school dances, turning gymnasiums into wonderlands on a budget of pocket change. I'd spend weeks scavenging thrift stores for decorations, sweet-talking DJs into discounts. The spring formal my junior year? Kids still talk about it. Twinkle lights, a makeshift photo booth, the works. I was so proud I brought home the Polaroids to show Orson. He flipped through them, grunted, then asked why I wasn't focusing on real skills like Vance, who'd just won a coding competition. "You're good at fluff, Darla," he said. Fluff. That word stuck like a splinter. College was more of the same. I studied hospitality management, aced my classes, and interned with a top Seattle event planner. My first big win was coordinating a charity gala that raised 50 grand. I called home, buzzing, thinking they'd finally get it. Nadine answered, distracted, said it sounded cute, then gushed about Mavis passing the bar. When I hung up, I cried, not because I wasn't happy for Mavis, but because I realized they'd never see me the way they saw her. I stopped sharing after that, keeping my victories small and private. The worst was Vance's engagement party, 4 years ago. I just pulled off a tech conference for a startup, a gig that got my name in a local magazine. I brought a copy to the party hoping for a nod. Instead, Orson toasted Vance's genius app launch, and Pippa cooed over his drive. When I mentioned the magazine, Nadine waved it off. That's nice, dear, but let's not steal Vance's thunder. Mavis smirked, saying I was great at making things pretty. I laughed it off, but inside, I was screaming. I started to wonder if I was invisible, or if they wanted me to be. That's when I decided to go all in on Vance's wedding, not just to help, but to show them what I could do. I thought if I created something undeniable, they'd have to acknowledge me. I poured every dime I had into it, every ounce of energy. I worked with vendors who'd become friends, Rusty, my florist, and Tilda, my caterer, begging favors to stretch my budget. I didn't tell my family I was funding it. I let them think Vance and Pippa were footing the bill. I wanted the reveal to hit them like a tidal wave, to force them to see me as more than fluff. But even as I built that wedding, I was building something else. My business, my reputation, my own little empire. I didn't talk about it at home, didn't mention the clients who started calling me the miracle worker. I kept it all locked away, like a secret I wasn't ready to share. Maybe I was afraid they'd diminish that too. Or maybe I was starting to realize I didn't need their approval. Either way, as I headed into that family dinner last year, I was carrying more than just resentment. I was carrying a truth they weren't ready for. The moment I decided to fund Vance's wedding hit me like a lightning bolt. It was a rainy Tuesday, and I was in my tiny office staring at a stack of bills. Vance had called, whining about how Pippa wanted a statement wedding, but their budget was tapped. I could have said no, could have let them figure it out, but something in me snapped. Not anger, but defiance. I thought I'll show them. I'd make their wedding so spectacular they'd have to admit I was more than their errand girl. So I said yes, I'd plan it. What I didn't say? I'd pay for it too. The struggle was brutal. I drained my savings, took out a second credit card, and worked side gigs to cover costs. I'd be up at 3 a.m., emailing vendors, then dragging myself to client meetings with bags under my eyes. Rusty, my florist, saw me fraying and slipped me coffee. Tilda, my caterer, threw in extra appetizers when I couldn't afford them. I was drowning, but I kept swimming, driven by this crazy hope that my family would finally see me. I hid the truth from everyone, Vance, Pippa, even my parents. They thought I was just coordinating, not bankrolling the whole show. The wedding itself was magic. Picture this, a cliffside venue overlooking Puget Sound, draped in white roses and fairy lights. A jazz band played as guests sipped champagne under a canopy of stars. I'd pulled strings to get a Michelin-starred chef, convinced a local artist to design custom centerpieces, and even wrangled a last-minute string quartet when Pippa changed her mind about the music. The guests, 300 of Seattle's elite, couldn't stop gushing. "Who did this?" they whispered. I stood in the shadows, watching Vance and Pippa take credit, my chest tight with pride and pain. I'd done the impossible. The budget was $200,000 and I'd covered $150,000 myself, scraping together every cent while keeping my business afloat. I didn't tell a soul, not even my best friend Selma, who helped with the linens. I wanted the reveal to be perfect, maybe at the reception, where I'd casually mention my role and watch my family's jaws drop. But when Orson's speech praised Vance's generosity and Pippa's taste, I froze. Mavis leaned over, smirking, and said, "Nice job playing assistant, Darla." I swallowed the truth, smiled, and let the moment pass. The success wasn't just the wedding, it was what it taught me. Pulling it off gave me confidence I didn't know I had. I started taking bigger risks with my business, pitching to clients I'd never have dared approach before. That's how I landed the hotel chain deal, a contract that'd make Darla's dream events a national name. But the wedding also left scars. I'd poured everything into proving myself, and my family hadn't even noticed. I started to see them differently, Not as judges I needed to impress, but as people who might never understand me. As I drove home from that wedding, exhausted but wired, I got a text from Nadine. Lovely event, Vance really outdid himself. I laughed, bitter, and tossed my phone on the seat. I didn't know then that my secret was a ticking bomb, that a single bank transfer would soon expose everything. But in that moment, I felt a shift. I wasn't just Darla, the invisible sister. I was Darla, the one who made miracles happen, and I was done waiting for permission to shine. The week before the annual family dinner, I was riding a high that could have lit up Seattle. My business, Darla's Dream Events, was on the brink of something huge. A contract with a national hotel chain to handle their flagship events. I'd spent months pitching, tweaking proposals, and charming execs like Grover, the chain's VP, who called me a visionary with grit. If I sealed this, my company would go from local gem to industry player, with a team, an office, maybe even my name in trade magazines. I should have been celebrating, but instead, I was dreading Sunday. The family dinner loomed like a storm cloud, threatening to drench my spark. These dinners were always the same. Orson would hold court at the head of the table, quizzing us like we were on trial. Nadine would sip her wine, dropping passive-aggressive hints about real success. Vance would brag about his startup's latest funding round, Pippa nodding like a bobblehead. Mavis would toss out legalese to sound superior, her husband Elton chuckling at her every word. And me? I'd sit there, picking at my plate, trying to dodge their pitying looks. Last year, Nadine asked if I was still doing those little parties, and I mumbled something about a corporate gala. She'd already turned to Vance, asking about his stock options. This time felt heavier. I was still raw from Vance's wedding, from pouring my soul and my savings into something they'd claimed as their own. I hadn't told them about the money, hadn't confronted them about their dismissal. Part of me wanted to walk into that dinner and lay it all bare. I paid for your precious wedding, Vance. I made it happen. But another part, the part that still craved their approval, held me back. I kept imagining Orson's frown, Mavis's smirk, Nadine's, "Oh, Darla, don't exaggerate." So I stayed quiet, letting the secret fester. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed with work. Selma, my right-hand woman, texted about a last-minute venue change for a client's anniversary bash. Rusty called to confirm floral orders for a tech conference. I was juggling a dozen projects, each one proof I was more than fluff. But as I packed for the dinner, doubt crept. What if they were right? What if all my hustle was just a fancy way of playing pretend? I shook it off, zipping up my dress, a thrift store find I'd tailored to look like $1,000. I wasn't going to let them dim me this time. The drive to my parents' house was 40 minutes, enough time to rehearse what I'd say. I'd keep it light, mention the hotel deal without bragging, let them see I was thriving. But as I pulled into their driveway, the mansion glowing with 2 perfect lights, my stomach twisted. I saw Vance's Tesla, Mavis's BMW, and Pippa's vanity plate convertible. It was like walking into a lion's den with a stake around my neck. I grabbed my purse, took a breath, and stepped out, not knowing a single notification was about to flip my world upside down. I rang the bell and Nadine opened the door, her smile all teeth. "Darla, you made it," she said, like I'd ever missed a dinner. I stepped inside, the smell of roasted lamb and judgment hitting me at once. Orson was already at the table, pouring wine. Vance and Pippa whispered in a corner, Mavis and Elton nearby, laughing at something I'd never be in on. I braced myself, clinging to the thought of my deal, my success, my worth. But deep down, I knew this night would test me in ways I wasn't ready for. Walking into that dining room felt like stepping onto a stage where everyone knew the script but me. The table was set like a magazine spread, crystal glasses, linen napkins, a centerpiece of lilies I'd have swapped for peonies in a heartbeat. Orson sat at the head, his tie crisp, eyes scanning me like I was a balance sheet. Nadine fluttered around, adjusting plates, her smile tight. Vance and Pippa were already seated, her hand on his arm, both glowing with that smug aura of people who think they've won life. Mavis and Elton lounged across from them, her sharp bob gleaming under the chandelier. I took my seat, the odd one out, and braced for the gauntlet. It started softly, like a warm-up. Nadine passed the asparagus and asked, "So Darla, still keeping busy with your little events?" Her tone was syrupy, but the little landed like a jab. I nodded, mentioning a recent tech conference I'd pulled off for 500 guests. Oh, that's sweet, she said, already turning to Mavis. Tell us about your new case, dear. Mavis launched into a story about a high-profile client, her voice loud enough to drown me out. Elton chuckled, saying, Darla, you'd hate courtrooms, no glitter allowed. Everyone laughed, and I forced a smile, my fork twisting in my hand. Vance leaned in next, all faux concern. You holding up okay, Dar? I mean, planning parties sounds fun, but it's not exactly stable, right? Pippa giggled, adding, Yeah, I'd die without a real paycheck. I could have mentioned the hotel deal, the 6-figure contract on my desk, but the words stuck. Instead I said, It's steady enough, and took a sip of wine. Orson raised an eyebrow. Steady's not enough, Darla. You need a legacy, like Vance's company or Mavis's firm. He didn't wait for a reply, just pivoted to Vance's latest app update. The backhanded compliments kept coming, each one a paper cut. Nadine praised my cute dress, then gushed over Pippa's designer bag. Mavis asked if I'd ever considered a real career, then bragged about her corner office. Even Pippa, who barely knew me, got in on it, saying, Darla, you're so good at details, bet you'd make a great assistant. I laughed it off, but inside I was seething. I'd bankrolled their precious wedding, and they still saw me as a kid playing dress-up. The worst part? I kept smiling, nodding like I agreed with their version of me. Halfway through the lamb, Orson leaned back, swirling his glass. Darla, you're what, 32? Time to stop dabbling. Vance was your age when he sold his first startup. I opened my mouth to mention the hotel chain, but Nadine cut in. Oh, let's not bore her with business talk. She's got her hands full with, what, centerpieces? More laughter. I felt my face burn. The weight of their dismissal heavier than ever. I wanted to scream about the wedding, the money, the truth, but I didn't. I just sat there, shrinking, while they carved me up with their smiles. As dessert arrived, some fussy tart I barely tasted, I felt my phone buzz in my purse. I ignored it, too focused on surviving the night. Orson was mid-lecture about family standards when Mavis smirked and said, No offense, Darla, but you're kind of the black sheep, huh? The table went quiet, their eyes on me, waiting for me to crumble. I forced another smile, but something in me was breaking. I didn't know that buzz in my purse was about to change everything, that the truth I'd buried was clawing its way out. The air in the dining room turned thick, Mavis's black sheep comment hanging like smoke. I gripped my fork, forcing a laugh, but the table's silence felt like a spotlight. Orson cleared his throat, his face hardening, and I knew something worse was coming. He set down his wine glass with a deliberate clink and looked at me, not with warmth, but with the cooled calculation I'd seen him use on business rivals. Darla, he said, we need to have a serious talk. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just another lecture about my dabbling. This was something bigger. Nadine shifted in her seat, her smile gone. Vance and Pippa exchanged a glance, and Mavis leaned back, arms crossed, like she was watching a show. Orson continued, his voice low but sharp. We've been discussing the family's future, and frankly, you're not pulling your weight. I blinked, stunned. Not pulling my weight? I'd spent years propping them up, funding their precious wedding, biting my tongue through their jabs. Before I could respond, he pressed on. Your little event thing. It's not a legacy, it's a distraction. We've decided it's time to realign our priorities. Mavis jumped in, her tone clipped. What he means, Darla, is we're done subsidizing you. Subsidizing? I hadn't taken a dime from them since college. I opened my mouth, but Orson raised a hand. Let me finish. We've been generous, letting you coast on the family name, but it's time you stand on your own, or step aside. Step aside? My heart pounded as Nadine chimed in. Her voice soft but venomous. We're reallocating resources, dear, the trust fund, the estate. It's for those contributing to our legacy. Vance, Mavis, they've earned it. You haven't. I felt like I'd been slapped. The trust fund wasn't some jackpot I'd been chasing. I'd never even thought about it. But the message was clear. They were cutting me out, erasing me from the family. Vance finally spoke, his tone patronizing. Look, Dar, we're not saying you're out completely, just prove yourself. Get a real job, maybe work for my company. Pippa nodded, adding, Yeah, we could use someone to organize our retreats. Their words burned, but what came next was worse. Mavis slid her phone across the table, showing a bank statement. We've already started restructuring, she said, smirking. Took a little initiative. My eyes scanned the screen and my breath caught. A transfer, $150,000, from my business account to an account labeled Family Holdings. My account. The one I'd used to fund Vance's wedding. They'd stolen it, siphoned it right under my nose, and now they were dangling it like a trophy. "You didn't need all that for your parties, right?" Mavis said, her voice dripping with mock innocence. I was shaking, rage and hurt colliding. "That was mine," I whispered. Orson shrugged. "It's family money now, consider it your contribution." Contribution? I'd given everything, my savings, my sleep, my pride, and they'd taken more, then had the gall to disown me. Nadine reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Darla, don't make a scene," she said. "This is for the best." The best? I wanted to scream, to flip the table, to tell them I'd built their golden boy's wedding from nothing. But I couldn't speak. I was drowning in their betrayal. My phone buzzed again, insistent, in my purse. I ignored it, too consumed by the knife in my back. The room felt smaller, their faces blurring as I tried to process what they'd done. They weren't just dismissing me, they were robbing me, rewriting me out of their story. I didn't know that buzz was the key to turning the tables, that the truth was about to crash their carefully staged drama. The dining room was a pressure cooker, my family's words, subsidizing, reallocating, step aside, ringing in my ears like a bad song on loop. I sat there frozen, Mavis's phone still open to the bank statement that screamed their theft. $150,000, my money, funneled into their family holdings. My vision blurred, not with tears but with a fury I'd never let myself feel before. They thought they could erase me, take what I'd built, and call it their due. I was about to speak, to finally let it all out, when my phone buzzed again, louder this time, vibrating against the table where I'd set my purse. Orson frowned. "Darla, really? Can't you silence that?" I ignored him, something in me urging me to check it. I pulled out my phone, hands trembling, and saw a notification from my bank app. Another transfer, but not outgoing, this one was incoming. A deposit of $500,000 from the hotel chain, marked Advance, Darla's Dream Events contract. My breath caught. The deal had gone through. Not just gone through, accelerated. I opened the email attached, and there it was. Grover's signature confirming a multi-year contract worth millions. My company wasn't just on the map, it was redrawing it. I looked up, their faces a mix of annoyance and curiosity. Mavis rolled her eyes. "What's so important, Darla? Another party invoice?" I could have laughed. Instead, I swiped to my banking app, pulling up the transaction history. There it was, the truth they didn't expect. My account, flush with the advance, dwarfing their stolen $150,000. I turned the screen toward them, voice steady. "You took my money, the money I used to fund Vance's wedding. But you didn't know about this, did you?" The table went deathly quiet. Vance's fork clattered. Pippa's mouth opened, then closed. Orson's eyes narrowed, scanning the screen like it was a trick. I kept going, the words spilling out. "I paid for your wedding, Vance. Every cent of it. $150,000 from my savings. The venue, the chef, the orchids, that was me. Not you, not Pippa, not your vision, me." I tapped the phone, showing the new deposit. "And this is what I've been building while you called me a failure. A $500,000 advance for a national contract. My company's worth more than your startup ever will be." Nadine gasped, hand to her chest. "Darla, you're exaggerating," I cut her off. "No, I'm done shrinking. You stole from me, then disowned me for not being enough. But I'm more than enough." Mavis tried to interrupt, stammering about family assets, but I wasn't having it. I stood, chair scraping the floor, and pointed at the bank statement on her phone. "That's theft. I have records, timestamps, everything. You think I'm the black sheep? You're the ones who betrayed me." Vance finally spoke, voice shaky. "Dar, we didn't know. Why didn't you tell us?" I laughed, bitter. "Tell you so you could mock me more? Call it fluff? I gave you the wedding of the year and you gave me nothing." Pippa whispered something to Vance, but he just stared at the table. Orson's face was red, but he stayed silent, his authority crumbling. I felt the weight of years lifting, the truth setting me free in a way I hadn't expected. My phone buzzed again. Selma, texting about a client, but I didn't need to check it. I'd already won. I grabbed my purse, ready to walk out, their stunned faces the last thing I'd see before I rewrote my story. The dining room felt like a stage after the curtains fell, my family frozen in the spotlight of their own making. My phone, still glowing with the $500,000 deposit, sat on the table like a grenade I'd just unpinned. I stood there, heart pounding, watching their faces, Orson's jaw tight, Nadine's eyes darting, Vance and Pippa shrinking, Mavis clutching her phone like it could save her. I'd laid bare their theft, my sacrifice for Vance's wedding, and the empire I'd built in secret. For the first time they had nothing to say. But I wasn't done. I took a step toward the table, voice calm but cutting. You thought you could take my money and call it yours. You thought I'd just sit here, smile, and let you erase me. I looked at Orson, his silence louder than any lecture. You preached legacy, Dad, but you stole mine. I funded your golden boy's wedding, and you didn't even say thank you. Vance flinched, mumbling, Dar, we didn't know. I cut him off. You didn't ask. You took my work, my savings, and gave me pity instead. Nadine tried her usual smoothing over act, voice shaky. Darla, let's not overreact. We're family. I laughed, sharp enough to make Pippa jump. Family? Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't disown you for not fitting their mold. I turned to Mavis, her smugness gone. And you with your restructuring. That's not initiative, it's greed. I have every transaction logged. You think I won't take this to court? Her face paled, and Elton shifted uncomfortably, like he wanted to bolt. Pippa, ever the performer, tried to play innocent. Darla, I swear, I thought Vance paid for the wedding. I fixed her with a stare. You love the spotlight, Pippa, the orchids, the chef, the headlines calling it Seattle's event of the year. That was me. You're welcome. She sank back, her diamond earrings catching the light like a sad little apology. Vance rubbed his neck, muttering, We'll pay you back, okay? I shook my head. It's not just the money, it's the years of you all treating me like I'm less. Orson finally spoke, his voice gruff. You've made your point, Darla. Sit down, let's discuss this. Discuss? After they'd voted me out of their precious legacy? I straightened, grabbing my phone. There's nothing to discuss. You showed me who you are, and I'm done begging for your respect. I looked around the table, their stunned faces a snapshot I'd carry forever. I'd built something bigger than your empire, and I did it without you. Keep your trust fund. I don't need it. I turned to leave, my heels clicking on the hardwood. Nadine called after me, Darla, don't do this. But I kept walking, through the foyer past the framed photos of Vance's awards and Mavis's degrees, none of mine ever hung. I reached the front door, the cool night air hitting me as I stepped outside. My car was right where I'd left it, a beat-up sedan next to their gleaming toys. I got in, slammed the door, and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. My phone buzzed, Selma, asking if I was okay. I smiled, texting back, better than ever. As I pulled out of the driveway, the mansion shrinking in my rear view, I felt lighter. They'd tried to break me, but they'd only shown me how strong I was. The road ahead was mine, and for the first time I wasn't looking back to see if they were watching. Driving away from my parents' mansion, the weight of their betrayal still lingered, but something else was blooming. A quiet, fierce relief. I didn't head home. Instead, I pointed my car toward Selma's place, a cozy loft in Capitol Hill where the lights were always on and the coffee was always strong. Selma, Rusty, and Tilda, my crew, my chosen family, were waiting for me. I'd texted them on the way, just a quick, dinner was a disaster. Can I come over? Within minutes they'd rallied, no questions asked. That's what real family does, they show up. I parked outside Selma's building, the neon glow of a nearby bar casting stripes across my windshield. My phone was quiet now, no buzzes from Vance or Nadine trying to claw me back. I climbed the stairs, and when Selma opened the door, her grin was like a warm blanket. Get in here, hero, she said, pulling me into a hug. Rusty was sprawled on the couch, his flannel shirt untucked, a beer in hand. Tilda was in the kitchen, stirring something that smelled like heaven, probably her famous chili. Took you long enough, Rusty called, tossing me a soda. I caught it, laughing for the first time all night. We settled around Selma's rickety dining table, mismatched chairs creaking under us. The contrast to my parents' polished dining room was stark. No crystal, no judgment, just us. I spilled everything. The wedding I'd funded, Mavis's stolen transfer, their plan to cut me out, and the bank alert that flipped the script. Tilda's jaw dropped when I mentioned the $500,000 advance. You're a freaking legend, Darla, she said, ladling chili into bowls. Rusty whistled, leaning back. And you walked out like a boss? Damn, I need popcorn for this. Selma, always the listener, tilted her head. How you holding up though? That's a lot. I paused, stirring my chili, the steam curling up. Honestly, it hurts. They were my family, you know, but standing up to them, seeing their faces when I showed them the truth, I felt free. Selma reached over, squeezing my hand. They didn't deserve you, we do. Rusty raised his beer. To Darla, the queen who doesn't need their throne. We clinked glasses and cans, the sound loud in the small room, and I felt my shoulders loosen. We talked late, the kind of talk that weaves you closer. Tilda shared how she'd left her own toxic family to start her catering business, scraping by until she found her groove. Rusty admitted he'd been the odd one out growing up, too, his love for flowers mocked until he turned it into art. Selma, who'd known me since college, reminded me of the all-nighters we'd pulled, building my business from a laptop and a dream. You were always bigger than them, she said. They just couldn't see it. The night ended with us sprawled on Selma's couch, some cheesy sci-fi flick on the TV, half-eaten chili bowls stacked in the sink. I looked at them, Selma's messy bun, Rusty's loud laugh, Tilda's chili-stained apron, and realized this was what I'd been chasing all along. Not my family's approval, but this. People who saw me, who cheered my wins and held me through the losses. As I drove home later, the city lights blurring past, I knew I'd traded a cold mansion for a warm loft, and that was worth more than any trust. The days after the dinner felt like waking up from a long, bad dream. My phone stayed quiet. No apologies from Orson, no texts from Nadine, not even a weak excuse from Vance. Part of me expected them to call, to scramble and fix what they'd broken. But the silence was their answer. They'd made their choice, and now I was making mine. I wasn't going back, not to their table, their rules, or their world. But walking away didn't mean I was done dealing with them. The stolen $150,000, the betrayal, it demanded a response, and I was ready to draw my line. First, I called my lawyer, a no-nonsense guy named Floyd, who'd helped me with business contracts. I laid out everything, the wedding funds, Mavis's restructuring, the bank statement she'd flashed like a trophy. Floyd didn't sugarcoat it. It's theft, Darla. We've got a case, especially with your records. I'd kept every receipt, every transfer, every email tied to Vance's wedding. Not out of suspicion, but because I'm a planner. Now that habit was my weapon. We filed a claim, not just for the money, but to show them I wasn't invisible anymore. I didn't want their empire. I wanted what was mine. Work became my anchor. The hotel chain contract was official, and I dove into meetings with Grover and his team, mapping out events across their properties. Selma stepped up, hiring 2 new coordinators to handle our smaller gigs. Rusty and Tilda pitched in too, tweaking designs and menus to match the bigger scale. Every call, every signed deal reminded me I'd built something real, something they couldn't touch. But I wasn't naive. My family's wealth meant lawyers, connections, maybe even a counterattack. I had to be smart. I set boundaries, hard ones. I blocked Mavis's number after she tried emailing some half-baked misunderstanding excuse. Vance sent a message through Pippa's phone, offering to talk it out. I replied one line, "Return my money, then we'll talk." Orson and Nadine got the same treatment, a letter from Floyd, formal and cold, detailing the claim. I didn't want their apologies, I wanted accountability. Selma watched me type that letter and grinned. "You're a badass, Darla." I laughed, but it felt true. I was done shrinking to fit their mold. The fallout wasn't just legal, it was personal. Word got out, because of course it did in their gossip-hungry circle. A client mentioned hearing about family drama at a country club, and I knew Nadine was spinning her version. I didn't care, let them talk. I wasn't the black sheep, I was the one who'd walked away from their cage. I started saying no to events tied to their world. No more galas for Orson's friends, no favors for Pippa's socialite crew. My time, my talent, was for people who valued it. One night I sat in my apartment, the city humming outside, and wrote down my new rules. No contact unless they make amends. No work that doesn't spark joy. No apologies for being me. It felt like signing a contract with myself, one I'd never break. My family had tried to dim my light, but I was shining brighter without them. The road ahead would be messy. Court dates, whispers, maybe more betrayal. But I was ready. I'd built my fortress, and no one was getting in unless I opened the gate. With the lawsuit filed and my boundaries set, I turned my focus to what I could control. my work, my impact, my name. Darla's Dream Events wasn't just a business anymore. It was my legacy, one I'd build without the shadow of my family's expectations. The hotel chain contract was my springboard, but I wanted more than profit. I wanted to create something that mattered, something that would outshine the tarnished legacy Orson and Nadine clung to. I was done letting their version of our family name define me. It was time to rewrite it on my terms. I started small but bold. I partnered with a local nonprofit, Hope Haven, to plan free community events, block parties, youth talent shows, even a wedding for a couple who'd lost everything in a fire. Selma and I worked pro bono, pulling in Rusty for flowers and Tilda for catering. The first event, a summer festival in a low-income neighborhood, drew hundreds. Kids danced to a volunteer DJ, parents swapped stories over Tilda's sliders, and I watched from the sidelines, heart full. A woman named Gertie, whose daughter performed a poem, hugged me and said, "You made us feel seen." That was worth more than any gala. The hotel chain noticed. Grover called after seeing a local news clip about the festival. "Darla, this is gold," he said. "Let's weave this into our brand, community events at every property." We brainstormed a national initiative, Dream Days, where each hotel would host free local events. I'd oversee the blueprint, training coordinators to pull off my style of magic. It wasn't just a job, it was a movement, proof that events could do more than dazzle. They could heal, connect, lift up. My name was on every proposal, every press release, Darla, the one who made it happen. My family's world started to feel like a distant planet. I heard through a client that Nadine was devastated by the lawsuit, that Vance's startup was floundering, that Mavis was scrambling to save face. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Their empire was cracking, while mine was growing. I hired more staff, including a sharp young planner named Kip, who reminded me of myself at 20. I mentored him, sharing the tricks I'd learned, watching him light up the same way I did. Building a team felt like building a family, one that chose me for me. The lawsuit moved forward too. Floyd got a settlement offer, $200,000, more than they'd stolen, but I held firm. It wasn't about the money, it was about accountability. We pushed for a public acknowledgement of their theft, something they'd hate more than any payout. I didn't want their name erased. I wanted it redefined, tied to my work, my values. Every event I planned, every article that mentioned Darla's Dream Events was a brick in that new foundation. One night, after a long day prepping a Dream Day launch, I stood on my balcony, Seattle's skyline glittering below. I thought about my family, how I'd once craved their pride. Now I was proud of myself. I'd taken their name and made it mean something better. Community, creativity, resilience. I wasn't their black sheep. I was my own shepherd, leading a flock that believed in me. The fight wasn't over, but I was winning, not just for me, but for every kid like Gertie's daughter, every dreamer who'd been told they weren't enough. Standing on that balcony, the city's pulse syncing with my own, I realized something had shifted for good. I'd spent years chasing my family's approval, measuring myself by their yardstick. Orson's lectures, Nadine's sighs, Vance and Mavis's smugness. Even when I funded their wedding, built my business, landed the hotel deal, a part of me was still that kid hoping they'd hang my sketches on the wall. But now, with the lawsuit humming, my Dream Days initiative blooming, and my chosen family by my side, I saw it clearly. Their validation was a mirage. My worth? That was real, and it came from within. I thought about the journey, the sleepless nights planning Vance's wedding, the sting of Mavis's bank statement, the rush of showing them my $500,000 advance. Each moment had carved me into someone new, someone who didn't need their nod to know she was enough. I walked back inside, grabbed a notebook, and started jotting down memories. Not the painful ones, but the victories. The festival where Gertie's daughter shone. The chilly night with Selma, Rusty and Tilda. The email from Grover calling me a game changer. These were my trophies, and they sparkled brighter than any trust fund. The lawsuit was still a shadow, but even that felt different now. Floyd called to say my family was buckling, offering a public apology alongside the repayment. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Their scramble wasn't my triumph. My peace was. I'd stopped seeing them as giants whose approval could make or break me. They were just people, flawed and small, clinging to a legacy I'd outgrown. I'd keep fighting for what was mine, but not to prove anything to them. I was fighting for me, for the Darla who'd built an empire from grit and heart. I started a ritual after that, a quiet one. Every Sunday, I'd sit with a coffee and write one thing I was proud of that week. Sometimes it was big, like signing a new Dream Day venue. Sometimes it was small, like teaching Kip how to charm a nervous client. It wasn't about boasting, it was about seeing myself the way Selma saw me, the way Rusty and Tilda did. I was Darla, the miracle worker, the one who turned chaos into beauty, not because anyone said so, but because I knew it was true. One morning I drove to the waterfront, the sound glittering under a rare June sun. I stood there, watching ferries cut through the water, and felt a calm I hadn't known was possible. I wasn't running from my family's shadow anymore, nor was I fighting to redefine their name. I was just me. And that was enough. The world was wide, full of people who'd value what I brought, clients, communities, my crew. I didn't need a seat at Orson's table. I'd built my own, and it was full. Have you ever had to walk away from people who couldn't see your worth? I know how hard it is to choose yourself, to trust your own light when others try to dim it. I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. Share what made you stand tall. If my journey resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to define success on their own terms. You don't need anyone's permission to shine. Your worth is yours, always, and no one can take that away.